I never imagined a birthday party, one meant to celebrate a man I deeply respected, would mark the beginning of a quiet storm in my life. The music, the wine, the polite clinks of champagne glasses, it was all perfect. Until the sudden thud. Until the silence. Until my boss's voice, shaking and furious, cut through the air. Who pushed me? Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you also. Tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. There are nights you expect to be unforgettable, and then there are nights that blindside you. My boss Lionel Graves' 60th birthday celebration was supposed to be the former. Held atop one of his glass-wrapped skyscrapers, the penthouse turned ballroom shimmered with money and menace. Lionel wasn't just a boss, he was a legend. A man people feared, respected, and envied. He had built the company from nothing, and this party was his way of celebrating both his legacy and his dominance. The guest list included politicians, CEOs, and the kind of people who could buy silence with a glance. I was invited because I was climbing fast in the company, his so-called protege. I brought Islam, my fiancée. She was radiant, dressed in deep sapphire that made the room feel colder every time she walked past. She had a knack for commanding space without needing to say a word. Lionel noticed her. Of course he did. He always noticed people who turned heads. He toasted to us early in the night, raising his glass and whispering, "She's got fire. You better hold on to that one." I smiled politely, but his words lingered with me long after the clink of glasses faded. There was something about the way he said it, like it was more a warning than a compliment. The night moved smoothly until it didn't. Lionel stood behind the massive 5-tier cake, smiling for the camera, his hand gripping the cake knife. Everyone had their phones out. The DJ dimmed the lights slightly to highlight the scene. Just as Lionel leaned forward to deliver a final joke before cutting into the cake, it happened. 1 second he was smiling. The next, he was flying. He fell with full force, face first into the centerpiece dessert. Plates clattered, gasps filled the air, and silence spread like poison. And then, from within the frosting, came the explosion. Who pushed me? His roar shattered whatever glamour the room had left. Security rushed to him, hoisting his cake-drenched body upright. His eyes, red with rage and humiliation, scanned the crowd. "I was shoved," he growled. "Someone pushed me." I stood frozen. I hadn't seen anything. Neither had most people. It was too fast, too sudden. Guests looked around, pretending to care, but silently relieved they weren't the target of Lionel's wrath. The security team reviewed the footage. I peeked too. The angle was blocked. Just a blur of movement and Lionel tipping forward. No clear suspect. Then Isla appeared beside me again. "What happened?" she asked, almost too calmly. I told her. She frowned and offered a soft, "Wow, that's crazy." But something in her voice, cool, measured, detached, felt off. I shook it off. Surely, I was reading into things. She didn't even know Lionel well. What would she gain from humiliating him? Still, something settled in my chest like a stone that wouldn't move. The Monday after the party, Lionel didn't show up to the office. He was silent, but his absence was louder than any threat he could have made. The building felt tenser. Emails were shorter. Meetings were cautious. No one mentioned the fall directly, but you could feel it hanging in the air like a thundercloud. I tried to get back into routine, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment. The way he stumbled, the strange timing, the certainty in his voice when he said someone pushed him. It didn't seem like a drunken misstep. It felt deliberate. I had dinner with Isla that evening. She seemed tired, almost indifferent. She picked at her food while I recounted Lionel's absence. "I'm surprised he hasn't fired the whole staff out of paranoia," I joked. She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe he should. Someone clearly had a reason. I paused, fork midair. You think it was intentional? She didn't hesitate. Of course. That kind of embarrassment? No one falls into a cake that perfectly without a little help. She sipped her wine like it was just another Tuesday. Her words landed heavily. I didn't suspect her, not yet. But I did start to notice. Like how she always changed the subject when I mentioned Lionel afterward. Or how she seemed almost amused every time someone brought up the party in passing. Still, I couldn't accuse her. It would sound insane. She had no known connection to Lionel, no motive I could see. But doubt is like water. It finds cracks in things you thought were solid. Then came the message. I was helping Isla transfer files from her old phone to a new one when I spotted something strange in her deleted messages. A line, without context. Done. No one suspects. It was dated the night of the party. I asked her about it casually. What's this from? She glanced, smiled thinly, and said, Oh, that was about a surprise I planned for my cousin's engagement. I nodded. She kissed my cheek. But my insides twisted. That wasn't an answer. That was a redirect. Still, I said nothing. Not then. I needed something undeniable. Something that would cut through the fog of doubt. It came unexpectedly, a week later, during a Netflix binge. We were watching a show where a character got shoved into a wedding cake. I laughed, mostly out of discomfort. Isla didn't laugh. She just muttered, Well, maybe he needed a little push. My breath caught. What did you say? I asked. She blinked. Just joking. But it wasn't a joke. Her tone gave her away. Calm. Satisfied. Rehearsed. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces rearranged. Isla hadn't done it in a moment of rage. She had done it with calculation. With timing. And she'd done it not just to humiliate Lionel, but to leave a scar on my career. Because in the end, it would always come back to me. The night she whispered that line, maybe he needed a little push, something in me finally cracked. Not with noise. Not with rage. Just a quiet shift. Like a mirror that had held for years finally splintered under its own reflection. I didn't respond. I just watched her, studied her face for signs of guilt or even remorse. But all I saw was the same calm expression she always wore. She didn't know what she had revealed. Or maybe she did, and assumed I was too blind to connect the dots. Either way, I knew then. My fiancé had been the one who pushed Lionel, and she thought she had gotten away with it. I didn't explode. That's not who I am. I've seen people burn everything down in a moment of fury and end up standing in the ashes, empty. That wasn't going to be me. No, I chose silence, not as a retreat, but as a strategy. That same night, as she lay beside me fast asleep, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just leave her. I wouldn't scream, accuse, or beg for answers. I would remove her from every part of my life, systematically, quietly, permanently. And when she realized what was happening, there would be no one to call, no one to blame but herself. The next morning, I began. The condo was ours on paper, but the lease was in my name. A gift from my parents, actually. She never bothered with the legal details. She was always more interested in the view than the deed. I called the property manager and gave notice. I asked to terminate the lease early, and since the payments were current, they agreed without hesitation. I paid a premium to have it professionally cleaned and staged for new tenants before she'd even know it was happening. While she was out running errands, I boxed my belongings, just mine, and quietly sent them to a storage unit under a different name. Next, I went after the boutique, her passion project, the business I helped fund. It was something she bragged about at parties, telling friends how her fiancé believed in her so much he invested everything. What she didn't know was that I had set up the company under a parent LLC registered to my firm. For protection, I once told her, and she had believed me. I pulled the plug, froze the accounts, revoked access to the site, closed vendor partnerships. In less than a week, her precious boutique couldn't process a single order. She emailed the support line repeatedly. I saw them all. I didn't reply. I made sure to move slowly enough for her to feel it. Not sudden, like a slap, but creeping, like a tide rising through the floorboards. A canceled card here. A missing key there. She thought it was bad luck, or stress, or maybe even sabotage, but she still hadn't guessed it was me. That was the most satisfying part. She didn't know how well I had studied her, how many conversations I remembered, how long I'd waited to see if the person I loved truly had a darker edge, or if it was all just my imagination. Now, I had my answer, and it came with clarity so sharp it no longer hurt. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. The final step was simple. I packed the last item, a black envelope, and left it in the mailbox she checked every Saturday morning. Inside was one image, a blurry still from the party footage, a frame the security team had dismissed. But to anyone who had been there, to anyone who had lived in her skin for long enough, it was unmistakable. The angle of her wrist, the shape of her heel, the timing. I had zoomed in, printed it in matte, and slipped it into the envelope with a handwritten note. You didn't just push him, you pushed me too. You broke something that trusted you. And now, all that's left is what you chose, nothing. I moved out that night, changed my number, canceled the wedding, disappeared like smoke in the wind. For weeks, she tried to find me, called my friends, messaged my coworkers, even showed up at my parents' house once. But I had warned them, told them the whole truth. She had no idea what it was like to lose everything because of one moment of cruelty. But now she would. Word eventually trickled back to me, through mutual acquaintances, whispers in passing. She moved to a small town 3 states away, working retail, renting a studio. No more launch parties. No more curated Instagram posts. Just silence. As for me, I kept my job. Lionel never found out. In fact, he handed me a promotion 6 months later, citing loyalty under pressure. I took it. I earned it. And every time I stand in that office, overlooking the city skyline, I remember the party, the fall, the frosting, and the push. I remember how betrayal doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes, it comes with soft hands and careful words. But most of all, I remember how satisfying it was to take everything away without ever raising my voice. Like this story, subscribe for more tales of betrayal, silence, and cold revenge. Drop a comment. What would you have done if it were you? Thanks for watching. Sometimes the quietest exit is the loudest revenge.